everybody. Today we are going to do module 23, thus Introduction to Food Spoilage. This module is going to cover definition of food spoilage, mechanism of spoilage, how it takes place, impact of spoilage and microbiological spoilage of milk and milk products, the causative agents, the mechanism of action and the preventive measures. So when we start this module, the first question which comes to our mind is, what is food spoilage? It is the undesirable changes which are occurring in food, making it unfit for consumption. When we talk about the undesirable changes, these can be change in color, change in texture, change in smell, change in the texture, and sometimes the change due to mechanical damage. There are certain facts which are about spoilage as a process. The first thing is that the microbial spoilage is the most common form of spoilage. Why? Because these microorganisms are ubiquitous, they are present virtually everywhere. Then the conditions which bring about their growth are available in food, be it water, oxygen and other nutrients. When we talk about the foods, they undergo different types of spoilage processes, and at times we can also predict the succession of microbes. When we talk about the food spoilage, it alters the food in various ways. These can be the physical parameters, it can be the taste of the food, the flavor, but the main thing is it's unsuitable for consumption. When we talk about the growth and multiplication of microorganisms, it is affected by various factors. These factors can be intrinsic within the food and extrinsic factors, which is the environment. Now, the next question which comes to our mind is why this spoilage happens. This spoilage takes place due to the proliferation and activity of microorganisms, even insects at times. And apart from this, there are inherent enzymes in the food which bring about the changes. Sometimes these are the chemical reactions which are due to the auto-oxidation. For example, is one of the main cause of chemical spoilage of food. Then we can have certain physical changes which are happening in food. Food spoilage is caused by microorganisms as well as natural decay and decomposition. When we talk about microorganisms, they can be of three types: bacteria, yeast and molds. Natural decay is due to loss of moisture, action of the enzymes which are inherently present in the food, and also due to chemical changes. The most important chemical change is the auto-oxidation, that is the action of oxygen on various components of the food. Now when this spoilage happens, there is an impact of this spoilage. This impact can be on the overall health and the well-being of the consumer. Even the quality becomes unfit for consumption, the edibility index decreases. Sometimes this very spoilage also affects the economy of the country and erodes the consumer confidence. When we talk about spoilage, it also indicates that there is a possible risk of pathogenic microorganisms and related food hazards. Now, understanding the microbial spoilage. For example, it's very easy to see yeast and molds growing on the food surface, but when it comes to bacteria, it is very tough. Why? Because at times the food which is severely infected, it also appears quite normal and it is consumed. Often the bacterial spores and bacterial toxins are detected once we go in for the microbiological analysis of this food, and that too after an outbreak of food poisoning has occurred. Classification of foods by ease of spoilage. Based on the ease of spoilage, the food can be classified into three categories. The first one is non-perishable foods such as sugar, flour and dry beans. These won't spoil fast as they have less amount of moisture. The second category is semi-perishable foods, for example potatoes, apples. They come with a slightly longer shelf life as compared to the perishable foods. The third category is the perishable foods, which are also known as the high risk foods, and they are associated with high amount of moistures. In this category we have milk, fruits and vegetables, eggs, meat, fish, seafood, poultry. Now we are coming to the main section, that is spoilage of milk and milk products. As we all know, milk is a wholesome and a balanced food. Biochemical reactions of bacteria which are present in the milk start as soon as this milk is drawn from the animal. The defects can be like flavor deterioration, and it might lead to souring of the milks, and ultimately the milk is unfit for consumption. Now, the microbiological quality of the milk depends on the initial count or the initial microflora of the raw milk. It also depends upon the hygiene of the plant and even what is the status of the post-processing contamination. Spoilage of milk and milk products. They are associated with various types of defects. The most common is the abnormal souring, sweet curdling, in which there is no acid production but the milk casein curdles. Gaseous is due to the production of various types of gases like hydrogen, CO2, H2S. Roux Penis is the defect in which the milk can be pulled out in the form of strings. Then we have a most common defect which indicates the effect of spores on the milk. This is known as the bitty cream. Discoloration is another defect which is due to the growth of various types of mold species and is associated with various types of colors due to the growth of various mold species and their spores. Then we have lipolysis, which is due to the action of enzyme lipase on milk and milk products. It often leads to a defect which is known as rancidity or rancid of flavors. Since milk is a good source of protein, we also see a common defect, that is proteolysis, happening in milk. This is due to the action of enzyme proteinases on milk, which leads to the breakdown of the proteins into simpler compounds. Then we have various types of off odors or flavors which are happening in the milk due to the growth of microorganisms and their metabolic products. Now coming over to the mechanism of spoilage. At times we see that there is an abnormal fermentation of one or more constituents by the microorganisms and leads to common defects such as gasiness, Roux Penis, proteolysis, sweet curdling, lipolysis and bitty cream. Souring is one of the most common defect which is found in milk and milk products. It occurs due to the production of lactic acid from lactose. Lactose is a milk sugar, and at ambient temperature it is converted into the acid, and when this acidity changes from 0.16% to 0.2%, it leads to curdling of the milk. At times the causative organisms are lactic acid bacteria, aerobic spore formers. These spore formers can be like Bacillus coagulans, coliforms, which are at times the indicator of safety and quality, and the common ones being E. coli and Enterobacter aerogenes. There is another defect, that is gasiness, which is very common in the milk, and this is due to the production of gases. These gases can be like CO2, H2S, hydrogen, and gasiness is commonly seen in milk, cream, sweetened condensed milk, and it is associated with lactose fermenting yeast like Candida, Pseudotropicalis, Proteolysis sphaerica and coliforms. At times anaerobic spore formers like Clostridium botryticum, Clostridium tyrobotryticum and Clostridium sporogenes are also associated with this particular spoilage. The next defect which can be seen in the milk is Roux Penis. Roux Penis means change in the consistency of the product, and it leads to the formation of thread or viscous masses when it is poured. When you are pouring the milk from one container to the next, we can see the ropes, and we call this defect hence as Roux Penis. The causative agents can be the gram-negative rods like alkali-genes, viscolactis, Achromobacter lacticum, Flavobacter, coliforms such as Enterobacter aerogenes. We also have the genus Micrococci, and it comprises of Micrococcus viscus. We also have lactic acid bacteria playing a role here like Lactococcus lactis, Lactobacillus casei and Lactobacillus bulgaricus. Now, these Roux Penis is formed due to the gums which are secreted by these microorganisms. These gums can be the true gums like the polysaccharides, and also they are together with mucins like nitrogenous mucus-like substances which are secreted by these lactic acid bacteria. The next and the most common defect is the proteolysis. Why? Because milk is such a good source of proteins. So when we talk about proteolysis, it is the process by which casein and the insoluble casein derivatives are broken down into water soluble compounds through the action of microorganisms or their enzymes. The enzymes which are playing a role here are proteinases, and they can be further subcategorized into proteases and peptidases. Now, when we talk about proteolysis as a spoilage, there again is a role of microorganisms, and majority of the microflora is psychotrophic in nature. This can be Pseudomonas species which are growing at the commercial refrigeration temperature which ranges from 0 to 7 degrees C. They are able to produce heat stable proteolytic enzymes which lead to the breakdown of the milk casein. The other defect associated with milk is lipolysis. This lipolysis is brought about by the hydrolytic breakdown of milk lipids, and it results in the production of free fatty acids and partial glycerides. These hydrolyzed products, they affect the flavor, and most of them which are implicated in off flavors are lower chain fatty acids such as butyric and caproic acid. And these free fatty acids also lead to rancidity in the long run. Microorganisms associated with lipolysis in milk and milk products. Most of the microorganisms which are associated with this defect are psychotrophs in nature. They can be the Pseudomonas species like Pseudomonas fluorescens, Pseudomonas ferrei, Achromobacter, alkali-genes, Serratia marcescens, Acinetobacter. There are certain mold species also which produce lipases and spoil the milk and milk products. These can be Geotrichum candidum, Cladosporium. We also have the role of yeast such as Candida lipolytica, Torulopsis species, Rhodotorula, Saccharomyces fragilis. When we talk about microorganisms, we have another class or group of microorganisms which are producing the enzyme lipase and bringing about lipolysis in milk and milk products. These can be the Staphylococcus aureus, which is coming from our skin, Clostridium perfringens, which is coming from the soil, Mycoplasma species. We can also have Micrococcus, some aerobic spore formers such as Bacillus species, Bacillus cereus, Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus coagulans. The other defect which is associated with milk is known as sweet curdling. Most of the time this defect is seen in milk and cream which are moderately or high heat treated dairy products. This defect takes place due to the production of an extracellular enzymes which is very similar to renin, which causes the casein to precipitate into the form of small particles of curd, and this activity of the renin increases at high temperature. When we talk about sweet curdling, we see a role of large number of microorganisms which can be the aerobic spore formers such as Bacillus cereus, Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus mucoides, Bacillus licheniformis, and also non-spore formers which are like Proteolysis, E. coli and even yeast and molds. Why is this known as sweet curdling? Because no acid has been produced, but still there is the curdling of the milk which happens. When we talk about milk spoilage, there are various types of off flavors also associated with the milk, and they can be various types of flavors which can be like the malty flavor, it can be the potato flavor, it can be the unclean flavor, it can also be the fruity flavor which is very sweet, and it is due to the production of ethyl esters. Now coming over to the defects in various milk products, we are coming over to the first defect, that is bitty cream. This is a well-known example which is the effect of the spores on the milk. It is characterized by the observation of flakes in the cream layer which do not mix well with the milk. The causative agents are again the spore formers like Bacillus cereus and various varieties of Bacillus cereus. The mechanism is very simple. It is the action of the enzyme lecithinase and phospholipase on the layer of the fat globule membrane, and partly from the coagulation of casein associated with the membrane. Now this problem is commonly seen in pasteurized milk, sterilized milk, ultra heat treated milk and pasteurized cream. Now coming over to the next defect, it is associated with butter, and butter is associated with various types of taints. Taints are nothing but these are the various types of off flavors, and these are caused by various putrefactive organisms like Pseudomonas species, coliforms and Flavobacterium. These taints are usually due to the breakdown of proteins, and there is a release of isovaleric acid which is in turn responsible for off flavor defects. In cheese, you can also see a cheesy taint which is due to the gram-negative rods. We can also find a fishy taint in butter which is due to Pseudomonas species, Geotrichum candidum and yeast. At times, butter is also associated with skunk-like flavor, that is Pseudomonas mephitica, which is responsible for this peculiar odor in the butter. Defects in butter. Under this, a very common defect in butter is fungal discoloration. This fungal discoloration is due to growth of various mold and yeast species. When we talk about the molds, they bring about a black discoloration which is due to the growth of Cladosporium species, Alternaria, Mucor, Rhizopus. The brown discoloration in butter is due to Aspergillus species and Phoma species. Sometimes we also see green and blue-green color on the butter surface, which is due to the growth of Penicillium and Aspergillus. Sometimes orange and yellow, which is due to Geotrichum candidum, and sometimes we can't even miss these reddish pink spots which are on the butter, which are due to Fusarium. Certain yeast species also have been implicated with discoloration. For example, black results due to the growth of Torula species, whereas the pink discoloration takes place due to the Rhodu Torula species. Now coming over to a very important milk product, that is sweetened condensed milk. The most common effect which is seen in this is the gasiness or the bloat. The bloating means it's a bulging or the blowing of the cans due to the production of carbon dioxide or a mixture of CO2 and hydrogen. The yeast are implicated, and the two most important species are Proteolysis lactis condensi and Proteolysis globosa. When we talk about the bacteria, we can always find the coliforms playing a role along with Bacillus cereus, Bacillus butyricus and Clostridium tyrobutyricum. We will always find that the spore formers play a very critical role in milk and milk product spoilage. Now coming over to the other defect, that's bacterial thickening. Now when we say the products are thickening, it is due to the production of rennin-like enzyme which acts on milk proteins, leads to high bacterial count, disagreeable cheesy odor and taste, and the microorganisms which are implicated are Micrococcus pyogenes, Staphylococcus albus, Staphylococcus aureus, Bacillus species. When we talk about this Bacillus species, again these are aerobic spore formers which are coming, and these are heat stable enzyme producing species. Now coming to the next and a very important defect in the sweetened condensed milk is mold button formation. This is due to the growth of molds and production of certain milk clotting enzymes which affect the casein stability. And when we talk about these buttons, they are of different colors depending upon the different mold species. For example, Aspergillus repens, Aspergillus gloicus, Penicillium species. Then we also have Cladosporium here. In the sweetened condensed milk, we see lumps of different sizes which are floating at the top and which have different colors like whitish yellow to reddish brown in color. All these buttons are formed on the surface of the sweetened condensed milk, and hence we give the name buttons to all these colored colonies of various molds which are floating on the top of the surface. Now coming over to the next milk product, that is evaporated milk, which is also known as EVM. Most of the time evaporated milk is associated with gassy fermentations or blot, and this gas is produced by the anaerobic spore formers, for example Clostridium, Photidium, which is like growing at 118 degrees C for 15 minutes. Then we have certain types of putrefactive changes which lead to gassy fermentation, and or you can say there is a generation of or the production of butyric acid, and there is a sulfite smell. The other defect which is associated with evaporated milks EVM is bacterial coagulation. This is caused by the aerobic spore formers like Bacillus subtilis. When Bacillus subtilis is involved, this is known as sweet coagulation, as no acid is produced. But when Bacillus coagulans is involved, there is a production of acid, and this is also known as sour coagulation. This usually takes place due to high storage temperature, inadequate heat treatment, improper cooling, and contamination with heat resistant bacteria. Now coming over to the next defect, which is bitterness. This is due to the breakdown and formation of peptones and other products, and also it leads to weighing off. We can see that the whey has separated away from the curd, and this is due to the growth of facultative spore formers which are usually having a high heat resistance, and the most common species is Bacillus amaris, and this has the ability to survive sterilization and is able to grow at room temperature. The other defect which is associated is fishy odor, which is due to the growth of Proteus, which is responsible for the generation of smell which is very peculiar of tridimethylamines. Cheese is another popular milk product, and it also undergoes spoilage because it's a very good source of proteins. So we usually find lots of bacterial spoilage happening in the cheese. The most common bacteria here is Alkaligenes viscolactis, which leads to the formation of slime or Roux Penis. Sometimes we also see a flat flavor, and this is a very common defect in case of cottage cheese, which is known as paneer in India. There are also psychotrophs which are growing in cheese, especially the Bacillus species, which lead to the formation of bitterness and proteolytic defects. Sometimes we also find gas production in the early ripening stage of the fresh cheese, and this is known as early blowing. Sometimes when the cheese has ripened, we still see the formation of the gas, and this is then termed as late blowing of the cheese, and it is caused by the Clostridium species like Clostridium butyricum, Clostridium tyrobutyrycum, and Clostridium sporogenes. When we talk about the cheese, it's not only a favorite for the growth of the bacteria, but molds also love to grow on cheese. And the most common molds which are usually growing and spoiling the cheese are Alternaria, Aspergillus, Cladosporium, Monilia, Mucor, Penicillium. These are usually growing in the cheese ripening room, and they grow on the surface of the cheese and they lead to its spoilage. When we talk about the cheese, another defect which is associated with the cheese is the rind rot. The rind undergoes a spoilage pattern which is due to the accumulation of the microorganisms on the cheese surface. These can be the film yeast, these can be the molds, these can be the proteolytic bacteria, and at times we also see the microflora from the air contributing to this particular defect. When we talk about the spoilage in milk and milk products, yes, they are bound to spoil. Why? Because they have the nutrients which are suitable for microorganisms also. Therefore, it's better to take some preventive measure, as it is always said that prevention is better than cure. So in case of milk and milk products, the first and the foremost important thing is the good manufacturing practices, that is GMP, cleanliness and sanitary practices both at the farm level and at the production level, and even at the processing level where this milk is being converted into various types of milk products. We should also use proper pasteurization and sterilization temperatures and time combinations, which is very, very important. And we should also not forget about the water quality, because in the processing of milk, lots of water is used. So therefore, we should be doing proper disinfection of water supply which is being used in the milk plant and for the manufacture of milk and milk products. Then most of the microorganisms, they also come from the air. Therefore, we need to keep an eye on the quality of the air, because this will really help us to prevent the problem of yeast and molds, because most of the spores are found floating in the air. The other thing which is very, very important is the low temperature storage. We have to keep it below 5 degrees C, because this temperature helps in decreasing the metabolic reactions and therefore increases the shelf life of the milk products. We should also maintain a low temperature during the transportation, distribution and storage. This means the cold chain really needs to be maintained right from the beginning till the end. Now, finally coming to the conclusion of this module, we can summarize this entire module under following points. The first point, food spoilage is either by natural decay in foods or by microbial contamination. When we talk about spoilage, it has a huge impact, which is not only economic but also gives us some indication that the pathogenic microorganisms are present and these food products can have health hazards. It is very, very important to follow the adequate cleanliness and sanitary practices at the farm level, processing level, and also during the transportation and storage of foods. Last but not the least is the maintenance of proper time temperature combination during the treatment, during the cold chain, and it needs to be maintained right from the beginning till the end. Thank you.